How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
My fellow Americans, welcome. It's Eric Erickson here, back home in the main studio today. Glad to be with you. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, very happy to have you with me. If any of you belong to the Ohoopee Match Club, I need you to invite me. Friend of mine is near Cobbtown, Georgia. A friend of mine just sent me a link. I need to go play any course that leaves like bottles of bourbon out on the golf course for you to find, and encourage you not to keep score. That's my sort of golf because I suck but love to play. Definitely going to need to find a way there. Okay. Serious moment for you here out of the gate. I wrote a morning piece that you can get if you text data to 33777. You're actually going to want this piece. It's open to everybody, paid and unpaid subscribers. And I was going to wait to push it out until I did this monologue and pushed the monologue with it. But I couldn't wait. No impulse control. I felt like it needed to get out there early this morning and get circulating. But I still want to talk about it. And for the vast millions of you listening, you're not subscribers, but you should be. But we got to talk about this anyway. It's important. As you know, the American media went nuts over Donald Trump's bloodbath comment. It was clearly in context about the automotive industry and the economy, but the media made it about his violent rhetoric and call to violence. What's notable is they jumped the gun. They immediately rushed to, he's yet again calling for violence. When people pointed out they got it out of context, some of them deleted their tweets, but most of them said, well, we know the context, but this is par for the course. And the epitome of this is Jen Psaki, who has a show on MSNBC, is the former White House press secretary. And I want to play her comment for you.
Trust me, I could go on and on and on. We all know by now that Trump's allusions to political violence are not merely rhetorical. His supporters take them literally. That's part of the big problem here. And he knows that too. So no, we did not miss the full context. This was not some meandering off-message comment. This is his message. As the Biden campaign put it, this is who Donald Trump is. A loser who gets beat by over 7 million votes, and then instead of appealing to a wider mainstream audience, doubles down on his threats of political violence.
Except there was no threat of political violence. It was rhetoric that the media itself uses over and over, this bloodbath rhetoric for what happens at the polls, what happens to jobs, when layoffs happen. There was no threats of violence, but the media decided to twist it into threats of violence. And of course, this is all they're going to do for the next 7-8 months through the election, because they've given up trying to sell Biden as somehow helping the economy. People buy groceries every week. They know he's not helping the economy. And so we're going to get this democracy versus dictatorship nonsense. Listen to this, also from MSNBC.
That's what's at issue. But what I'm saying is, if we allow Donald Trump to succeed in fuzzing these issues up and making it seem as if nothing important is at stake, then people whom you and I know love their rights, love democracy, love American history, most of it, will not act to say that. They'll just say there's no difference between Trump and Biden. So all I'm saying is, you and I know, are totally agreed that, from now until the election in November, we've all got to say the only issue is democracy versus dictatorship. Don't let them take it away.
Democracy versus dictatorship. There's a headline out today Where is this? Yes, this is the Associated Press. Trump is making the January 6th attack a cornerstone of his bid for the White House. No, this is projection from the left. The Democrats are making January 6th. Trump is responding to the Democrats making January 6th the cornerstone of Biden's reelection campaign. They're even bringing back Christine Blasey Ford. Remember her? Rolling Stone says she's coming out to tell people all about the threats against her when she accused Brett Kavanaugh of sexual assault. This is what they've got. Accusing Trump of violence and daring you to vote for him. So let's talk about right-wing violence. You know, I was at CNN when Gabby Giffords, someone attempted to assassinate her, whenever that was. I remember I was at, there was a conference the beginning of the year called Awakenings. I had been invited to it. It was in Kiowa Island, and the news broke, and I had to go home. I had to be on TV to talk about it. And it was me against the hosts and the Democrats, all of whom were indicting the Republicans. The details were still fresh, and yet it was the Republican violence that led us. The media pounced. The Republicans are always accused of pouncing. It was the media and the Democrats pounced, accusing Republicans of violent rhetoric. The New York Times blamed Sarah Palin for a mail piece that had targeted Gabrielle Giffords' district, claiming she put a target on her district, which is common political rhetoric. Then it turns out the shooter was mentally ill and not politically motivated. To the extent he had political leanings, he was a socialist. They moved on from that story, but it took about a week to move on. Floyd Lee Corkins, in 2013, after the Gabby Giffords shooting, Floyd Lee Corkins went into the Family Research Council with a handgun and a bag of Chick-fil-A sandwiches. Family Research Council, my friend Tony Perkins runs it. My friend Jody Heiss is there now. Great people, great people. A fantastic organization I'm proud to support. Floyd Lee Corkins went in with a bag of Chick-fil-A sandwiches and a gun and intended to put bullets in the heads of the employees and then stuff Chick-fil-A sandwiches in their mouths because they opposed gay marriage and were listed as a homophobic group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Fast forward, James Hodgkinson showed up at a baseball field outside of Washington, D.C., where Republicans were practicing for a game and attempted the mass assassination of members of Congress, nearly killing Steve Scalise. James Hodgkinson actually was motivated by politics. James Hodgkinson was not a right-winger. James Hodgkinson was a progressive activist who watched MSNBC and read the Southern Poverty Law Center website, and he wanted to shoot and kill Republican members of Congress. I was not at CNN at the time, but I have many friends who were. Every single conservative on that network at that time says the moment it became apparent James Hodgkinson had political motivations, the network moved on from the story. Every single conservative who worked there that I know said they moved on from the story. The moment it turned out he was a Bernie Sanders supporter, they dropped the story. I was there for the Gabby Giffords shooting, and we went on 4 or 5 days talking about the story until it turned out the guy had no political motivation. Only then did we drop it. But those 4 or 5 days were pure speculation, and it was me versus everybody else defending Republicans, that their rhetoric was not enough to incite someone to violence, that this was clearly a crazy person. No. They used a symbol that looked like a target in Gabby Giffords' district. Had to be politically motivated until it turned out not to be. The American Press Corps has picked a side. Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, they view him as, and so they'll bend their judgments and twist the truth and standards to ignore things Democrats do and play up anything they think can be tied to Donald Trump, including his statement about bloodbath, which was clearly about the economy, but they're going to twist it and say, well, we're not really taking it out of context because the whole context is he's violent and incites people to violence. They still claim January 6th was an insurrection. This still boggles my mind. It was a bad day. It is a condemnable day. I was the one who said the police should have opened fire to keep the people out of the Capitol, to protect Congress. I still get hate mail from people on the right about that, but it was not an insurrection. It's the statistically most well-armed group of American citizens ever to exist, and they all showed up without their guns. Some insurrection. One shot fired that day by a police officer, stopping a woman from smashing through a window. On Trump's inaugural day, over 200 people were arrested. The night before, at a ball, Republicans were attacked, one injured. The police had to fire tear gas. On inaugural day, over 200 people arrested. They smashed windows of businesses. They threw Molotov cocktails. They threw concrete and rocks at police. 6 police officers were injured. Remember, they talk about the police officers injured at the Capitol on January 6th. They never want to talk about the police officers injured by progressive activists on Trump's inaugural day. Charges against 129 of the rioters were dismissed. 21 people pled guilty. Others were found guilty. The reason for the disparity, and they point to the mass number of people arrested on January 6th as disproportionate, except on inaugural day, they couldn't use cell phone records to specifically tie people to the fire bombings of businesses and the violence against police. And many of them had their faces covered and security cameras couldn't pick up who they were. On January 6th, it was very easy. Round up everybody whose cell phone records showed they were inside Congress. It was easier to prosecute. That's why. The reason so many people had their cases dismissed over Trump's inaugural was because the police could not actually tie them to the violence. The progressive left in the last few years has sabotaged rail lines. Have you heard major national coverage about this? It's true. Progressive activists have sabotaged rail lines in this country, derailing trains carrying fossil fuels. They vandalized the Constitution and Declaration of Independence just the other week, destroying works of art as progressive activists scream about climate change. They've attacked individuals and corporate CEOs and others who they say are threats to the environment. Progressive activists have done this. They've attempted mass assassinations of Republican members of Congress and conservative political workers in Washington, D.C. They've rioted. They've vandalized businesses. They've firebombed businesses. They've harassed people in churches. In Atlanta, they've attacked police and firefighters and firebombed a youth facility to stop a police training facility from being built. All of these people are on the left, and what does the media do? Check the box. Well, we gave it 3 seconds of news coverage, therefore you can't say we didn't cover it. Look at what's happening on college campuses. College professors in anti-Semitic tirades. Progressive students hounding Jewish students locked inside a library, demanding they come out and face justice. Speakers on college campuses being shut down and chased off campus by progressive activists, many times with the academic community and the leadership of the universities nodding along in agreement. All progressives. And the media doesn't say anything about it. The media doesn't say anything about that violence. They don't want to cover that violence. They only want to cover the right. I want to go back to Jen Psaki. You need to hear this again.
Trust me, I could go on and on and on. We all know by now that Trump's allusions to political violence are not merely rhetorical. His supporters take them literally.
His supporters take them literally. There's just one problem with what Jen Psaki said. In just the last decade, we've had a mass assassination attempt on Republican members of Congress and a mass assassination attempt on conservative political activists. And both of the would-be assassins were MSNBC viewers, not Fox News viewers. Is Jen Psaki going to hold her own network and her own side accountable? I'm not going to hold my breath. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the nation. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, delighted to have you. Now, I got to add some extra context because I think it's deeply important for you to have this context here when it comes to behaviors of the media on all of these issues. When young men shoot up schools. If they're white, we get multiple days of coverage in the American press. If they're transgender or black, they move on as quickly as possible. If they're a young white man who commits violence and writes a manifesto, the media wants to publish it. If it's a young transgender person in Nashville, the media has no curiosity whatsoever about the manifesto. None. If there's a mass shooting and it is black on black violence, like in Alabama at a birthday party, the media ignores it. If it's an elderly white man who shoots a young white woman who's backing up in his driveway, media doesn't touch it. If it's a young black man who gets shot through the door of a home by an old white man, gets wall-to-wall media coverage, lectures on race in America, and a presidential visit. Intersectionalism, critical theory define which shootings are relevant and which are not, and which violence is relevant and which is not. And this gets to even the coverage of the Israel-Hamas situation, where much of the coverage about the violence after the first week and the shock wore off was essentially, well, you know, Hamas, they're oppressed and they're lashing out of the oppressors. And you see this as well with the rhetoric on the right, that Donald Trump's words and calls about bloodbath must be taken as literal calls to violence. But when Barack Obama says, get in their face and take a gun to a knife fight, well, it's just figures of speech. He's given a pass. He's given a pass. There is a double standard, and that double standard is playing out in news coverage. But also, it makes it less likely that people on the right will pay attention if there's something relevant. If something is really relevant, the right is going to tune out the media because the media has picked a side. They've picked a side. They have an agenda now, and that agenda is to stop Donald Trump and to scare everyone about democracy and dictatorship, when the left would be perfectly fine with a dictatorship as long as it's a Democrat in charge. Hillsdale College wants to educate you about the Constitution, the meaning of the Constitution, the meaning of citizenship. They want to give you a free series of lectures from Victor Davis Hanson, the acclaimed military historian, who I am a big fan of, by the way. I am fanboying over doing this for Hillsdale. EricForHillsdale.com, E-R-I-C-K, for Hillsdale.com. You can go sign up, give them your email address, and they will get you the Victor Davis Hanson lecture. You can review them at your own pace, share them with family and friends, and start a relationship with Hillsdale College. One of the cool things about Hillsdale is this is the beginning of the relationship, not the end. They've got so many great courses you can take on C.S. Lewis, on the Constitution, this on the decline and revitalization of citizenship in America, so much more. It's like a monastery for the mind of conservatism. They want to preserve our constitutional order. They do such a good job on their campus as well. And now there are so many classical Christian schools and homeschooling programs that use their materials. Start a relationship with Hillsdale College today. Go to Eric, E-R-I-C-K, EricForHillsdale.com today and check out Hillsdale College, EricForHillsdale.com. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. Delighted to have you with me. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Let me see if I can make Heather happy. So we're experimenting with some video stuff here, and I just had catastrophic video failure, and I, while talking to you on the radio, am also trying to figure out the stupid camera situation in my office, and it just decided to bomb out, but I think I might have just found a replacement. Live on air while I'm talking to you, diagnose, troubleshoot, and do an equipment swap. I am multi-talented. Now, I want to switch gears because I was going to talk about something else, but one, I need to tell you, there are primaries around the country, and several listeners down in Florida have said, why bother voting if Trump's got the nomination? Well, there's a couple of reasons. If you support Donald Trump, you want to make sure he wins big, because you want the headline to not be Trump loses 30% in Florida. This is a warning sign for the general election. If you don't support Donald Trump, well, then you do want the headline to be Donald Trump's got problems and maybe needs to stop attacking Ron DeSantis on the stage. So you want to go show up in Ohio. Well, it is primary day there, and Bernie Moreno, it looks like he's jumped into first place in a close race against what's his name, Matt Dolan. And here's the problem here. The Democrats have poured a lot of money into the end to help Bernie Moreno get across the finish line first. The reason is because they think he's the most vulnerable to be being beaten by Sherrod Brown. They desperately want him to be the nominee, but so does Donald Trump. That's a problem. Trump actually doesn't have a great history of picking good Republican candidates. I mean, Dr. Oz, Blake, what's his name? Blake Masters, Kerry Lake, Herschel Walker, Joe Kent. A lot of Donald Trump's nominees in close races tend to blow up. And the Democrats are really hoping Bernie Moreno becomes the nominee in Ohio because their data and information show he's going to be the easiest to beat. So Ohio voters probably need to keep in mind, are you going to fall for the Democrats' trick again where they help elevate the candidate they think is most vulnerable? Just keep that in mind. Now, I gotta take issue with a lot of friends. I'm a conservative. I used to be a party guy. I was an elected Republican. Like a lot of political commentators out there, I actually got myself elected office. Worst job I ever had, by the way. I should note, there's this thing called a constituent. They're also called a voter, and they are stupid. And stupid people who are constituents and voters want things from you. And those people oftentimes have irrational demands and cannot understand that things are actually a little more complicated than they think. What I'm getting really frustrated with some of my friends on the right, engaged in the same behaviors as people on the left, is they get on social media and they start saying things should happen and certain people should take certain actions or do certain things that they know for very legitimate, good, and often legal reasons won't happen. So then they can complain about it not happening. I go nameless because I actually do like the guy, but I saw a guy yesterday who's a political prognosticator on the right say that with Sam Alito, that's Sam Alito of the United States Supreme Court, enjoining Texas from enforcing a law about rounding up illegal immigrants, that Texas should go get a bunch of other states, start rounding up and arresting the illegal immigrants, and when the feds come to stop them, arrest the feds. That may sound really good to you, but it's also unconstitutional. And not only is it unconstitutional, but if you arrested the feds for stopping you, you would be personally liable. The police officers who arrested the federal agents would themselves be personally liable. Are you going to foot their bill? Probably not. There are reasons things happen and don't happen. There are things that can and cannot happen, and there are processes. And you can say, well, the left gets away with stuff, but the left doesn't get away with that. The left doesn't get away with arresting federal officers. There's personal legal liabilities. It's great for you to just throw stuff out there and throw chum in the water and get people excited and anxious and riled up about stuff and then make people angry when what you say should happen doesn't happen and never mind the consequences. There's a lot of nihilism on the right these days. You just want to watch the world burn, stir people up. You don't need a solution. You don't want a solution. You just want people to be existentially anxious and in terror all the time about things that you can't control and offer up wild solutions using your credibility to claim that it's a credible option when it's not and people don't know any better, and you're preying on the vulnerable just like the left does. And that gets me to the Supreme Court case about free speech. Because I'm seeing a lot of people on the right, and by the way, I'm intentionally not saying conservative because I think a lot of these people have rejected conservatism for the feel-good, do-it version of populism that actually gets nothing done except riles people up and gets them constantly agitated. At issue is a serious issue, and that is, can the government use social media companies to censor Americans in ways the government cannot? That is actually an easy constitutional issue, and the answer is no, The government cannot use third parties not bound by the First Amendment as a proxy to do what they can't do. There are two separate cases woven together. One is about the state of New York and others bullying companies into not supporting the National Rifle Association. I suspect the Supreme Court is going to say you can't harass companies to not do business with the National Rifle Association because there is an explicitness in the engagement that if you do business with them, we're coming after you. It's kind of an implicit threat when the government comes calling and says, don't do business with this group. Well, don't do business or what? The government doesn't tend to reach out to you just for the sake of a good-natured FYI. The other is the social media case out of Missouri. These cases have been strung together. In the Missouri case, contrary to what so many people have said, there's actually a little more nuance to it. And I realize we're not at an age where people do nuance. The government reached out to social media companies, Twitter in particular, but also Facebook, and said, hey, this information is disinformation. This information is foreign disinformation. This is being circulated by right-wing people. We want to let you know that we think it violates your terms and services. There is, like the NRA case, an issue of, is the government threatening these companies? And that's going to have to be dealt with by the Supreme Court. But the broader issue here, and one that's getting lost in the conversation and a lot of the angsty spin of people on the right, is this one. There are people on the right, again, not conservatives, but populists, who are staking out the position that the government can never talk to social media companies, and in particular can never tell social media companies that they're amplifying falsehood. There are people on the right who wish you to know that if the Supreme Court rules otherwise, that the First Amendment is scrapped, and that's not true. It's fatuous nonsense. The government absolutely, just as any private citizen can, talk to a social media company. And the government can, just as you and I can, tell a social media company that something that is getting widespread traction on their site happens to be foreign disinformation or happens to be false. The government can get it wrong, too, because they're infallible people. Again, the reason to be a conservative is because we're all sinners and we should want as few in charge of us as possible. So small government is a good thing. When big government gets a handle on things, this becomes a problem. It does become a problem. My point here is not that the conservative case is wrong. I actually support Missouri in the case. The problem here is a lot of the spin by a lot of people on the right is willfully overbroad so that if they don't get their way with something they know they're not going to get after oral arguments, they can do what the left is doing, which is discredit the Supreme Court. Because both sides have now decided to go down this path where if you don't get your way, you discredit the other side. If you don't get your way, you get to discredit the institutions that did not give you your way, never mind the legal merit. And the fact of the matter is, government has to be able to be in dialogue with private corporations in America. The lines are, what is that dialogue? Is there an implied threat? Are they telling these companies that they should not do something, or are they just giving these companies information that the companies don't have access to? This whole idea that Twitter wouldn't otherwise censor these voices, Twitter at the time was run by a group of progressives who were willfully censoring people, myself included, more than once, without government interference. I really get mad at people who purport to be on my side these days, who really do want you as angry as the left does. I don't know who needs to hear this, but a guy showed up at work today. He's been showing up at work. He works 7 days a week. Doesn't even take off on the weekend. And he showed up at work today, too. In fact, he works long shifts every day. His name is God. and he showed up for work again today. So everything's going to be okay. There's no reason to panic. So much of the left-wing angst in this country right now comes from a group of atheists who form their own religion, and they drive themselves into an existential frenzy of terror on a daily basis, hatred of the other side, what the other side is going to do. People on the right are doing the same thing, except the people on the right are supposed to be grounded in a faith tradition. There are certainly atheists on the right, but the majority of them, the overwhelming majority of them, have always said they believed in the sovereignty of God, except none of them act like it anymore, or very few of them do. So this idea that we need to discredit the institutions that don't give us our way, we need to drive you into a frenzy of existential dread over what the other side is going to do, you don't have to behave like the left. You don't have to operate that way, particularly if you believe there is a sovereign God on his throne and all things work for the good of those called according to his purpose. You absolutely do not have to behave like the people who reject the very notion of the divine. And yet so many people on the right who profess Christ as Lord on their lips act like they themselves are God Almighty in their actions, and that they themselves should whip everybody else into frenzy by lying through misstatement of truths, through half-truths, through twisting of truths, through twisting of fact, through twisting of what's going on in the world in a way that offers you solutions that fail you every time, but they can keep whipping you into a frenzy about what's going on. The fact of the matter is, it doesn't look like the First Amendment is in jeopardy at the United States Supreme Court. If you actually listen to the hearing, what is at jeopardy is this brand new idea from the right that corporations and the government should never be allowed to talk to each other. And there are people on the right who now claim that that's the way it should be, except that's the way it's never been in this country. And that's not going to change. Stop lying to people for your own clicks and ratings, people, please. I'm afraid because people on the right have been so mendacious and tried to carve out such a broad exception, we're not going to get the things we want. That the lawyers involved in the case fell into the right-wing echo chamber. And instead of offering up some reasonable rules that the Supreme Court could deploy, because you got a very sympathetic court to the argument about government and corporations, but they wanted to be so broad in their application, I'm afraid we're not going to get what they want. And that's not the Supreme Court's fault. That's the problem of the right-wing echo chamber reaching too far beyond what they should. There seems to be a very clear situation with the NRA and the New York Attorney General and others that the shakedown of companies saying, don't do business with this, when it had an implied or else, and that's unconstitutional. But the level of communication with private businesses to let them know they may be circulating disinformation, whether the government was right or not, whether they lied or not, that's not on the social media company. That is on the government. There can be consequences for it, but the consequence should not be and is not going to be from this Supreme Court that the government and corporations cannot talk to each other. And anyone telling you that that's the way it should be, and if they don't get their way, then the Supreme Court has failed us, is lying. That's just the truth. And we shouldn't exchange the truth for a comfortable lie, just so that we can get people to click on our stuff. I do want you to click on visioncomputers.com and go check out their website. You can also call them at 404-COMPUTE. Tell them I sent you. Get great deals. They can build you a laptops, desktops, servers, gaming PCs, workstations, whatever you need, and then they can be your service department. But here's the thing. You can pay just $179 a year. That's a year, $179 to Vision Computers, and they can help your IT support, your IT solution. So your assistant, your coworker, your employee can get Vision's phone number and call them for support, so they can be really good at their job and then rely on Vision Computer that's really good on their job to take care of their computers, so you don't lose out on productivity. They send to Vision what they need. They don't have to master their computer. They master their skill set. If you have an IT guy already, you don't want to give him up, well, Vision can offload a lot of the menial IT stuff on how do I fix my email, how do I fix my printer, how do I do this on the computer, so the IT guy can focus on the big stuff. It's $179 a year. Phenomenal deal, phenomenal company, visioncomputers.com or 404-COMPUTE. Tell them I sent you. This part of the program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan, wherever you are nationwide. First Liberty can help your business grow. You buying a building, buying a franchise. Those are the sorts of things that they can help you with. FirstLibertyGA.com. Tell them I sent you. FirstLibertyGA.com. I got to play for you a quick soundbite from Joe Biden. This is the president of the United States.
All kidding aside, there's not a damn thing a man can do that a woman can't do. To state the obvious.
There's not a thing a man can do that a woman can't do, except be Woman of the Year if competing against a man who dresses up like a woman. There's not a thing a man can do that a woman can't do except win a swimming competition if it's a man dressed up as a woman, or win a track meet if a man dressed up as a woman, or be a fashion icon in Sports Illustrated these days. If a man wants to dress up as a woman, the man is going to get the job and win the prize. That, my friends, is the truth. Look at Bruce Jenner becomes Caitlyn Jenner, doesn't even chop off his boy parts, and gets named Woman of the Year and gets some heroic award. There was some other dude who got named Woman of the Year recently. Look at the Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services. That dude dresses up as a woman in military uniform and gets to be the Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services to check a DEI box. Some woman was deprived of that job because Joe Biden wanted a dude in a dress for the job. There are lots of things women cannot do if men decide to do them because of that. Also, lifting lots of heavy objects as firefighters and things like that. Yeah, men tend to outperform those things. Why are we dismissing biology? And you know, by the way, there are things that men can't do that women can do. Like, for example, if Caitlyn Jenner ever wanted to have a baby, he's not going to be able to. Only women can have babies. I actually saw, it was yet again a TikTok video the other day of some dude who's become a woman who is convinced that he is pregnant. Yeah, he's going to find out that's not the case. I'm telling you guys, this battle of the sexes stuff, the reason Joe Biden is doing this, by the way, is because he's losing every demographic group except women, so he's doing everything he can to hang on to the women. But, you know, letting men compete for their scholarships and be in their bathrooms, really not a great way to keep women on your side, Mr. President, despite placating them with these trite little lines.